Today on the show, we've made it through every page of Frank's novels. Today, we're fielding your questions as we process this wild, wild journey that we've been on for 6 years.
Welcome to Gom Jabbar, your guide to the iconic world of Dune. We'll be exploring the themes, philosophies, and characters found in the sandy depths of this vast universe, from Frank Herbert's groundbreaking novels to the adaptations on film and TV. My name's Abu.
My name is Leo.
And Leo, here we are. The final live Q&A for the book club series. We've completed Chapterhouse Dune, and we're here to talk about this entire series by Frank Herbert and answer our listeners' wonderful questions.
Yeah, dude. And now it's no holds barred. Like, we have the spoiler warning in the script here, but it's like today's spoiler warning is no spoilers except for all of Frank's books and like the Dune Encyclopedia and everything. So yeah, feels weird. Feels weird to have covered absolutely everything. Yeah. So strange.
It's strange. Still kind of processing it, but we'll do so live together here on YouTube with our audience.
YouTube sponsored therapy. It's great.
That's right. Okay, before we get into all of the wonderful questions we have in our script here today, and also all of the wonderful questions that hopefully we'll get in the live chat from folks listening in, let's knock out some housekeeping, starting, of course, like we're joking, with our spoiler warning. Typically for these book club episodes, we say, hey, as always, today's episode will contain no spoilers beyond the pages and books we've covered thus far. But today, that means all six of Frank Herbert's Dune novels.
Yeah.
Dune all the way through Chapterhouse Dune, because we have now covered all six books. Make sure you have read all of those before you continue listening.
Indeed. And as always, a huge shout out to our Kwisatz Haderach level patrons. Seriously, Daniel Dion, Seth Redden Greer, Brad Hutchins, Kevin Mahinram, and Roger Young. Thank you so much. We have been doing Gom Jabbar for 6 years. The Kwisatz Haderach level was something we kind of jokingly made available. And the fact that you five have been helping out the way you have for as long as you have is just unbelievably generous. And of course, that thank you extends to all of our patrons. Seriously, Gom Jabbar has been what it is because of the support that you've been giving us, and because we've had the bandwidth that, you know, your support grants us to put the time in and make this as good as we try and as good as we can. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Really, anybody who's supported us, it means the world.
It truly does. And look, we get it. Money's tight. The economy's a mess. Here's your Strait of Hormuz update. It's still not fucking open.
Is it still not open? Holy shit, I've not been paying attention.
Maybe. And also the public feed listening to this 3 months from now, it'll be really sad if that joke still lands.
Oh, no, true.
Regardless, we understand that becoming a monthly supporter of a small show on the internet isn't always in everyone's budget. So check out the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes below. It's just a place where you can toss us a one-time tip of any amount of your choosing to show your appreciation and to continue helping us do what we do.
Means the world. Okay, so that's housekeeping out of the way. Today's episode is a mailbag episode. We mentioned that already. We have some questions from you, the listeners. We also have a live chat going with a group of people. And we're basically here to respond to those questions, talk through them, process all these feelings we have having finished Chapterhouse Dune. Insane. We're going to start the episode really focusing on Chapterhouse Dune because it's the thing we just finished. And then we're going to expand in the later parts of the episode to the wider Dune universe. And finally, we'll wrap up on some fun off-topic questions. That's the game plan. Before we get into any of that, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere. When we're back, we're going to get right into your questions. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back, folks. Let's dive in. And as promised, we're going to start today's episode honing in on the Chapterhouse Dune specific questions.
Yeah.
Starting with this one from patron The Real Miles Tegg about the perfect government. Miles Tegg writes, quote, "Given everything Frank has said about politics and government structure throughout the series, how much do you think the Bene Gesserit system represents his hypothetical ideal system? They live in a state of total surveillance of their top officials with the ability to do a vote of no confidence at any time. He portrays the sisterhood as imperfect, of course, but I can't help but wonder if he was making a proposal for how democratic governance could function in his view." End quote.
Yeah. What a super interesting question, Teg.
Yeah.
Really loving where your head's at. Very strategic, very Miles Teg coded, I will say. Now, I will say, I think that Frank is doing what many sci-fi authors do, which is they look at some human system or human contraption and they expand it and they say, what would it look like if, and then expand it over, 30, 40,000 years and the Bene Gesserit and other memory and these other things, right? I do agree he's exploring how democratic governance could function. But when we're talking about like his hypothetical ideal system, I think that's where I'm pretty convinced Frank is pretty much a libertarian and is very like individual accountability, individual autonomy, small government, but like to the extreme where he wants to be on his homestead, growing his own food and making his own energy and totally kind of self-capable and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
At least in his interviews, like that's the impression I get.
Same.
So the Bene Gesserit certainly are this like what if exploring democracy, if it were absolute. But I think he provides the answer within especially Heretics and Chapterhouse that is not in fact an ideal system. That really the ideal system, the thing that will last forever, is something like the Golden Path, right? This undefinable, flexible, different day to day, rising to meet unknown challenges of tomorrow, this unknowable thing that is in humanity's future that Duncan and Siona and the Hidden Jews and Sightale and all these people on this ship represent. I think like out there in the scattering somewhere is what Frank would say is the ideal system, right? Highly capable, highly adaptable, flexible individuals taking their own destinies into their hands is the thing he would like pop a beer cap off and be like, hell yeah, brother.
Yeah.
That's my take, at least. What do you think, Abu?
I completely agree. I don't have a whole lot to add to that because I think you nailed it. I personally, based off of all of the research and work we've done and how we've immersed ourselves within Frank's stories and his interviews and his world for the past 6 years, I get the impression that he was not particularly someone concerned with answers to things, right?
I think that's a great point, yeah.
Like many writers, and in particular, like many sci-fi writers, will take an issue they see in modern society, whether political or social or economic, whatever it may be, and incorporate it in their story to make some sort of commentary. This is what I think is working. This is what I think is not working. This is how it could work. I don't know that this is the solution, but maybe it could be. It's an exploration of what ifs. And I think Frank Herbert, in his stories, he certainly had political views. And he certainly was opinionated about things that he felt were wrong or misdirected or corrupt, right? But I don't think he necessarily was offering up solutions or alternatives to how we should do things. So I see the Bene Gesserit and the Honored Matres in these last two stories, I see them as continued explorations of potential governments by Frank Herbert and the continued pitfalls and warnings of those governments, right? What if we take this philosophy to the extreme? I think that's simply what Frank is doing here. I don't know that he was offering up the Bene Gesserit government on a silver platter.
That's so well said, because isn't the Honored Matre literally the warning about what would happen if the Bene Gesserit's highly managed democracy just went 5 degrees further and now they are like utilitarian, ultimately tyrannical and awful, right? This like noble system with perfect planets and schools and aren't they great? And then you just dial that dial from 8 to 9 and now you have like bloodthirsty, sex-driven, like women kicking people's heads off.
Leotard wearing freaks.
That's the worst part about them, and I stand on that. But yeah, I think that's exactly it. I think he's asking a lot of questions. He is denouncing things like the feudalistic systems of the old empire, for sure. I see a lot of cynicism in what he writes and how he writes about certain systems.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're so right.
And I do want to highlight, we have a great comment in the chat here from Normal Senva. Senva writes, agility seems like a very important trait to Frank. He idealizes trimming the bureaucratic fat and forming governance at the point of use for that specific event, then dissolving it again.
Dude, Normal Senva bars.
I think that's a completely fair read.
Well said.
Yeah.
A lot of his criticisms, and this is true across all of his writings beyond even Dune, a lot of his criticisms are on just like the bureaucratic process and how fucking like slow shit gets when you're having to turn to your superior every time you want to ask something. And I think that's a lot of where his like libertarian impulses lead you. Because if you want to build a solar panel on your farm in upstate Washington, you just fucking do it. You don't have to like apply for a permit and talk to someone in local.
Yeah, it's very clear bureaucracy is a dirty word to Frank Herbert. Never say that around him. I also want to highlight what Mark says here in the chat. That's very idealistic.
Yeah.
And I agree. That's why I think Frank is not offering up a perfect system on a silver platter, ready-made for us to implement, and then we live in a utopia. I think Frank's pitfall was that he had some idealistic, optimistic, and unrealistic, I would say, views of humanity that maybe don't apply at scale.
Yeah, I mean, 100,000%. But let's not forget, Frank was an entertainer, a novelist, fucking writing fiction in the 50s and 60s, where he was in a genre that wasn't even studied in colleges. I mean, he was like a political speechwriter at one point in his career, but I think it's also a little unrealistic for us to be like, oh, I can't believe this fiction novelist.
Yeah, the sci-fi author didn't solve government for us? What the fuck?
I think in retrospect, I'm like, the fact that he had such strong ideas and then really fucking explored them in his work and said something with his books, I'm like, oh, hell yeah, dude. And I really appreciate it the more I think about it.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to our next question. This is an email from listener Colin asking specifically about Abomination. Colin writes, "Howdy, mate."
Howdy, Colin.
I don't know why. I don't know why I kept that in the script.
I mean, it's super
Howdy,
important.
mate.
It really sets the tone.
It sets the tone, you know. Now I have a picture of Colin in my mind.
Howdy, mate. Do you want me? Actually, do you want me to read this in kind of a southern?
You do it. Yeah. You're wonderful at accents. Do a Colin for us.
Well, howdy, mate. Now, why is Abomination and or being preborn not mentioned or important at all in the last 3 books? It feels strange that both becoming Abomination and being preborn are such a pillar of the first 3 books, then basically never be mentioned again. Now, might be some mention of these things in God Emperor of Dune, but I haven't read that slog of a book since the book club. Yours truly, Colin.
Oh my gosh, incredible. 10 out of 10. You knocked it out of the park. Wow.
I mean, Colin did the work. Like any good movie, I was the actor who showed up and the script was well written. So
that's right.
Great
that's
question,
right.
Colin. Love where your head's at. Love your accent. I'm sure I nailed it.
Love your accent, Colin. What a great question. And I think what's kind of interesting is I literally hadn't considered this until reading Colin's email. Like Abomination just didn't cross my mind for these last 2 books at all. There's a couple of ways to approach this question. I think we should just state up front that there is no concrete answer for why Abomination just disappears from Heretics and Chapterhouse. There's no answer in Frank's books. There's no answer in the encyclopedia. So we're basically left to theorize here. And a couple of different theories come to mind for us when trying to explain why Abomination is no longer a factor for the Bene Gesserit in these latter 2 books. So to briefly lay out these theories, theory number 1 is that, well, Leto and Ganima basically solved this back in Children of Dune, right? They kind of cracked the Abomination code and figured out how to overcome it. So perhaps the Bene Gesserit simply took those learnings from the twins and incorporated them into their own acolyte training going forward.
You know what? As I'm thinking about it, there is the reference during Myrbella's spice agony, she talks about that woman at the controls of the spaceship who is her Mohalata, or that's how it's like, that's how it's written.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this benign other voice that protects you from abomination, which is, not to put too fine a pine on it, literally what Chani was for Ganima and what Paul was for Leto 2 to a degree.
Yeah.
And there is an argument to be made that Leto 2 is abomination, but that's for another day. The point is, we have examples of Bene Gesserit now in their teachings are like, hey, by the way, there's this thing that helps you avoid abomination. And we didn't get any mention of that during Jessica's spice agony or even Paul's. So part of me thinks this is, again, background. It's not front and center. This isn't super important.
Yeah.
But this is why abomination just isn't an issue anymore, because they have this idea of the Mohalata, like benign ancestor who can protect you from the other whispering voices.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that's a wonderful pull from Chapterhouse, because it is just like a one line throwaway thing. But I think there's a clear dotted line you can draw from Myrbella's awakening back to the teachings of Leto and Ganima and how to overcome abomination. You know, I think that's a pretty hopeful interpretation ultimately of why abomination is no longer a threat. I like to think that the Bene Gesserit for many generations now have stopped killing children who show early signs of abomination.
Sure.
And have instead begun teaching their students to control it and to recognize those early signs and to use techniques like your inner Mohalata to stop abomination from overcoming you, like it did with Alia. So that's theory number one. And I do believe that's the strongest theory. I feel like that's exactly the road the Bene Gesserit went down. But just to lay out the other two theories real quick, theory number two, I think, could just be simply that other memory as a technique may have just evolved. Recall that we are thousands of years after the time of Paul and Leto and Ganima. And so, I don't know, it's not hard to imagine that the Bene Gesserit would have continued developing all of their techniques over this time, refining, honing, finding different ways to use them. And so maybe they've just been able to build up more robust safeguards against abomination to the point where it's not a danger anymore.
Right.
So, you know, kind of like putting it in other terms, like other memory the Pro 18 Max version of other memory is just better and safer to use than the other memory 3G that you had 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
Yeah. No Face ID. And also the camera on the new other memory is so much better. It's crazy.
So much better. My gosh, the HDR photos are so crispy.
That brings us basically to the third theory. And this is the least fun, but we always have to acknowledge it. I also think there's another kind of kinder way to talk about this as well. Frank forgot and or didn't care. I think didn't care is really it. I think like the idea of abomination as like this thing that needs to be fucking talked about and worried about by one of the most important orders in the universe just isn't anymore. And it's not a focus of his as the author. He's just not talking about it anymore because he's talking about all this other shit. And it's not like I came away from the last two books going, oh man, if only there was abomination in those two books, they would have been 10 out of 10.
It didn't serve the narrative anymore.
Right. We're not talking about children during spice agony and, you know, the thing that happened with Chani and the twins and Paul and then his sister Alia, et cetera, et cetera. But it is also the case there are, in fact, mistakes between the earliest books and the last book. So there are things that Frank maybe just let slip. Abomination as a key narrative device in those earlier books was used up. Maybe Frank was also like, I've talked about that.
Totally.
And I've used that lever in my stories. Now let's talk about something else.
Totally. I also want to point out from the chat, Eli's got a great little bonus theory here for us. There are also hints that Siona and her descendants can't be preyed upon by abomination. And I love that as a theory as well. You know, it's easy to imagine that Leto II, the God Emperor, when he is preparing humanity for Siona's descendants to be invisible to prescience, would also kind of throw into the recipe a little abomination defense.
Some other upgrades.
You know?
Yeah. Nice firewall.
Exactly.
NordVPN Plus. He's like, and and your IP address can't be read. They're like, what?
Right. Throw a little VPN in there into the mix, and then you're a little safer. That's a great point from Eli as well. Is I think Siona's descendants play a big role there too, against the dangers that perhaps these early users of these abilities were just like in the Wild West, open to all the dangers that Prescience brought.
I do want to address quickly too the comment that Mark Mueller left, which is, seems like it's a big underlying fear in the last two books. It's basically Duncan's fear in the last book that the Reverend Mothers will think he's an abomination, ? Which I love a sentence with just a question mark at the end. Mark, that's a good point. Like, Duncan is afraid of the Reverend Mothers making certain deductions about him, but I think it's pretty clear from the text he's worried about them thinking him a Kwisatz Haderach, not an abomination. I mean, again, maybe an abomination in the colloquial sense, like your fashion sense is abomination, but like the specific capital A abomination, that is like you were a pre-born human who in the womb or before Bene Gesserit training, you are awakened to other memories. Now I'm concerned about you becoming abomination like Alia was possessed by Baron. I don't think that's a concern because although he has his serial lives, and I think there are some big questions there. So I'll grant you as well, they don't know. I think if they're like, oh yeah, he's a serial Gola, what does that fucking mean? I do think that there's some fear there. But I don't know that they would put the capital A abomination on him. And if they did, I don't know that that's even necessary. Like, I don't think O'Drade was thinking or worrying about that at all. And O'Drade was really the one who knew the most about everything, other than Duncan himself.
Yeah. Great question, Colin. Thank you so much.
Amazing
question. We still love your accent.
Very cool. Yeah, no, and thanks, partner, for all of the things you wrote. All right, let's move on to a question from patron Not a Robot AI on the 7th book. Quote, what would your 7th book be? Would you do a direct sequel or skip ahead 1,000 years? Would you follow the No Ship or the inhabitants of Chapterhouse, or both, or neither? What would you have liked to see? End quote.
We get this question a lot, especially now that we've completed Chapterhouse.
We get this question a lot. And now that we've finished Chapterhouse, I think we can say pretty definitively how we feel about it. And I think you and I are on the same page.
Yeah.
Abu, what do you think? 7th book.
Right.
Do we even need it?
Here's my answer. And I'm going to say, I am wondering how many of our listeners are not going to like our answers here, but you know what, Mark, you fucking asked, so we're going to answer. When it comes to a hypothetical 7th book, I don't feel any need or desire for a 7th book to exist at all. I actually thought that Chapterhouse was very conclusive, and it wrapped up the story of the Bene Gesserit and the Honored Matres, and even the story of Duncan Idaho and Siona quite nicely. That final chapter in particular, which we talked at length about in our previous book club episode in part 16, that chapter with Marty and Daniel makes it clear to me that Frank was saying farewell to his universe and to these characters that he created. And that just all kind of feels really final to me.
Yeah, agreed.
Am I saying there are no more Dune stories to tell and we should all collectively as a society stop telling Dune stories? Absolutely not. I think there are an infinite number of Dune stories to tell, and we should be telling more of them.
Yeah.
But I think the story that Frank Herbert set out to tell in Dune in 1965, that story concluded in Frank's own words at the end of Chapterhouse. So personally, I don't think we need a 7th book at all. What about you, Leo? You have some more nuanced thoughts here, but I think we're actually in agreement.
Yeah, broadly we're in agreement. I think if you had asked me like 3 years ago this question, I would have tried to speculate what Frank had in mind. But we found interviews with him where he was saying, I just mailed Chapterhouse Dune to the publisher and I don't have plans for a 7th book. Like, he said that in an interview. So with that data that he sent off book 6 with no intention of like, I'm definitely doing a book 7 that's going to like wrap up all these big questions that I have asked. Like, I reassessed and I genuinely think book 6 is like a fucking spectacular end. I do not buy this like posthumous, narrative that he had this trilogy planned from the offset and that he was definitely going to do a 7th book and but he died too soon. And he probably had notes for it. I'm sure he had all sorts of ideas of what he could explore later, but he clearly didn't see it as necessary. Otherwise he wouldn't say that in interviews. So I agree. I don't think a book 7 is necessary. And in fact, if we lean on this interpretation of, as you said, Daniel and Marty as Frank and Beverly, allowing these characters who they've been controlling and they're basically like gods to these characters. They let these characters get away and escape into unknown stars, this unknown destination. I think that's like the most beautiful ending and is so true to the golden path. It's like this whole fucking time we've had Paul in his prescient visions glimpsing the golden path with Leto in the God Emperor era and then Heretics and Chapterhouse. It's all been about the golden path, and now we fucking have it. The unknown tomorrow, the unwritten next book. And I think that's kind of the point. But to your point, Abu, that doesn't mean I don't want more Dune shit. I just think that the core storyline with these characters, these events, and these like stakes, it's done.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah.
Let's go and tell other stories. So what I wanted to say is, let's say, hypothetically, Frank got another 20 years of life and he decided he was going to write a bunch more of Dune stories. I would want him to write more short stories because honestly, Frank's short stories are fucking fun. They're super cool. I enjoy a lot of them. I've read a few of his collections. They're great. They're a good time. I have also heard that the earliest drafts of God Emperor of Dune was written in the first person as Leto's journal. And then later he excerpted specific little like entries to make these scenes, to make the book that we hold in our hands and we read. Similarly, I recall him writing parts of the original Dune in haiku because that forced him to just cut out all of the unnecessary prose to really focus on what needs to be said and communicated, and then expanding it from haiku to proper prose. So I like Frank when he gets a little experimental. I like that kind of shit. I think that's cool. So what I want is Frank to go back before Paul, before any of the like prime narrative stuff. We don't need to talk about prophecies or, you know, the first Reverend Mother, anything. I would just love to hear about people living on Poratrin or Ikaz or some other planets that we haven't heard of, and talk about, like the reunification of the universe after the Holtzman wave was invented. Like, let's talk about that. I want a nice little short story about that. And I think that like him pushing our frameworks of what kind of science fiction looks like set within these kind of semi-familiar locales would be excellent. And again, I think you and I are on the same page. We would love more Dune stuff. I think it's just a little bit tired to continue to try to relate it always back to, oh, well, this is like an early Idaho person. And, oh, this is like an early Atreides person. And, oh, this, it's like
it's all Skywalkers all the way down, baby. It's like, no, it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
What a small universe you've painted, you know, when it's just the same fucking families. Again, there's lots of things to complain about with Brian and Kevin, but like, in the Schools books, the Schools trilogy, you have like Vorian Atreides and you have Anari Idaho. And it's like, I get it. You want to make these families, and we know that Atreides family is very old, but it's like, we just don't really need that. So anyway, I think that's where we both fall. And honestly, we're getting some great comments.
I was just going to say, we're getting some great comments in the chat. Mark writes, I think he would have kept writing them until he died, which of course he did. But he didn't have a grand narrative plotted out ahead of time.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's true.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think that's true.
That's a great point.
I do think he would have kept writing them until he died because the money was worth it. I don't know if y'all saw that George R. R. Martin interview, but George R. R. Martin talked to Frank one time.
Whoa.
When they were both still alive and George was a young writer. And Frank basically admitted to him that he was getting sick of writing Dune, but the paychecks were just too good.
Holy shit.
You know, that is also what happened to Asimov with Foundation, you know? Like, he didn't want to keep writing Foundation, but the paychecks were just too good.
Yeah.
And you just kind of keep churning out the thing that makes you a ton of money and is your livelihood. So I agree. I think you would have kept writing them.
Yeah. And even to like Yannicki's point, like, if you had to, would you skip or continue? I would continue. Again, I would not continue.
These characters.
I in fact would do a hard stop. I think these characters, the events, like for me, the old Imperium with Marbella as the head of the joint sisterhood / Honored Matre, the old Imperium's taken care of. It's done. And the question of this no ship that's off in unknown stars is done. Like, I don't really want to know more about these Daniel Marty characters because, like, right now they can exist as this beautiful allegory for Frank and Beverly saying goodbye to their universe. And if you try to over-explain everything, it just makes it small and containable in a way that's really not satisfying to me. I think I like the idea of asking questions. So I want Frank to continue to ask questions, but maybe those questions take place much earlier or much, much, much later. Like, I don't mind if he jumps forward 10,000 years and starts asking a new question about something, but I do think this pattern of jumping forward in time was also getting a little bit familiar.
Yeah.
And I think I would want Frank to do something unfamiliar.
I mean, credit to Brian and Kevin, what little credit they've earned. I think their instinct to go back was correct, to fill in the 10,000, 20,000 year long history of this universe that Frank never filled in, right?
Yeah.
You know, I disagree with how they handled it, but
yeah,
there is such rich history and such rich text in the Dune universe that is just waiting to be filled in by talented storytellers. There's 10,000 years of incredible history there. And it would have been fun had Frank continued his stories if he had maybe gone down that path, rather than a continuation of Duncan and Siona and fucking Sightale.
I mean, to the point that John Body Shots Curtis makes, he gave us all we needed to finish the tale ourselves in our minds. We were no longer novices. I like that a lot. That's very cool.
Yeah, beautifully said.
First, I wanted to shout out Zeptageus's excellent comment that Book 7 plot twist, Daniel and Marty are just Jesse and James from Team Rocket, which is like so funny. Excellent. So but then Zeptageus follows up with, liked some more about the in-between children and God Emperor when Leto was mid-metamorphosis in his shifting mindset. I think that'd be great. A little novella about Leto really questioning maybe the point at which he no longer considered himself human, right? And the like deep feelings of I'm leaving this behind really, truly now.
Yeah.
I think that could be really beautiful. And I agree. Like, that's a huge chunk of time that, again, we don't need anything that's too revolutionary or eye-opening, but something like poetic and pensive that asks some good questions. I'm here for it. Yeah. So Mark said, I'd skip a few thousand years, new planets, new honored degenerate, Gesserit. Oh my God, it's hard to say. New honored Gesserits or Bene Matres.
Bene Matres.
Bene Matres gives me Benihana's vibes, and I don't know why. Maybe it's just the way I said it. I mean, sure.
Yeah.
But I think the point is, like, there was mystery all throughout the journey, and it'd be fun to crack open some of that mystery anywhere and discover new mysteries. Again, give me my fucking Ampalaros novella, please.
That's right.
Please.
That's right.
I'm tempted to make it like a horror sci-fi video game where you're like stuck on the Ampalaros.
I'm in. Let's do it.
Yeah.
I want to end our discussion on this with Normal Senma's incredible comment here.
So good. Chat. Oh my God. Thank you. Yeah.
Senma writes, my Dune novella would have a support group called Descendants and Spouses of Duncan, Idaho. The acronym would be DASOIDI, DASOIDI.
Amazing.
DASOID. Senma says that this support group has been around for centuries and centuries.
That's so funny. Yeah.
Love it.
Like Duncan, Idaho's like blown up by a fucking grenade or whatever. And then the grieving widow receives a card and it's like, call us. We know what you're going through. And she's like, who is this? And they're just like, it's just a group of women.
We're the secret society of former spouses of Duncan, Idaho.
DASOIDI. It's a card that just says DASOIDI. This is incredible.
Amazing. Mark, thank you so much for the question. Thank you for giving us the space here to share our thoughts, and the live chat has been excellent here.
Now we're going to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. When we're back, we've got some more questions about the Dune universe more broadly. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, folks. Let's widen our scope now. We have some questions here from our audience about the wider Dune universe. And I think it'll be interesting to tackle some of these now that we have completed all 6 of Frank Herbert's novels. So let's begin with a question from listener Anais about maternity. Anais writes, I was wondering if there were descriptions about pregnancy and maternity traditions or customs in Dune, other than within the Fremen. I don't have much hope given that the books and encyclopedia were written by men, but I thought I'd ask in case I was wrong and there was enough info to do an episode on this topic.
Yeah, great question, Anais. Great fucking instincts because, yeah, sci-fi book series from the 60s, big old sausage party, lots of fellas. I will say, though, something in your question caught my eye. It is not necessarily the fact that only men wrote the Dune Encyclopedia.
This is true.
Fun fact, Dune Encyclopedia has about 43 authors and includes a number of women. It is hard to get an accurate count because we haven't finished processing all of the documents from the Fullerton archives, but I did a quick summation. In fact, a full third of the existing Dune manuscripts that we have for the Dune Encyclopedia were submitted by women. A lot by Christine Watson, but by other women as well. So it is kind of cool. We have some representation for ladies in the authorship of the Dune Encyclopedia.
Yeah.
That being said, there is absolutely a gap of coverage when it comes to certain aspects of life in the Imperium, partially because, of course, Frank wasn't taking time to talk about maternity and paternity necessarily in his like grand scope science fiction adventure. And then also because there was only one Dune Encyclopedia. And frankly, McNelly had to cut it down from its full possible length to a much smaller length, which is what we got. But along the lines of your question, there are two entries in the Dune Encyclopedia that I wanted to highlight. One, you've basically indicated that maybe you're not interested or maybe you already know about it, which is Fremen menstruation, which was an article in the Dune Encyclopedia written by Christine Trowbridge, a.k.a. Christine Watson. But there is, in fact, a very interesting entry on contraception in the Imperium, just broader Imperium. And it's a very cool entry. For the entire entry, check out your local PDF of the Dune Encyclopedia. It is worth a read. I thought it was very fun. But I did excerpt a couple of little data points here, which maybe gives you a little bit of an answer. It's not enough for a full episode, but it's enough for us to take a minute and talk about it here.
And to be clear, we recognize that like this isn't exactly information that you asked for. You asked about pregnancy and maternity and motherhood and details about those things in the Dune universe.
Right.
This is more about contraception.
Right. But also I was thinking like, I think for today, pregnancy is, of course, the steps that lead up to pregnancy, the fun time sometimes that leads to it. But it's also the means and measures you have to prevent it from happening when you don't want it to happen.
Yeah.
Having it happen when you want it to happen and that sort of thing. And here is where I think a lot of the details are very cool because we have Christine Watson writing what is, contraception look like? As a woman, what does contraception look like in 30,000 years?
Yeah.
And she paints a very cool picture.
It is a very cool picture. So here's a little bit from that contraception entry in the encyclopedia, just to give you a taste of what's in there. Christine writes that, for instance, by 6,795 AG after Guild, contraceptive technology in the Dune universe had basically plateaued. And the most popular form of contraception was a small scrotal implant that lasted for 6 months. It dissolved on its own. It had 0 side effects, and it was 100% effective as a preventative against getting pregnant. Honestly, sounds perfect, especially the 0 side effects part.
I mean, it's fucking cool. Like, I think, right now, like vasectomies are reversible and basically painless, but it is like an operation. And that's something that like, I think scares a lot of people. And again, deep sympathy for ladies with like IUDs, fucking insane what people go through, what especially women go through. But the idea of like, a little like implant that like quick, easy, 6 months, fine, dissolves on its. I'm like, this is fucking so cool. And I love that Christine was like, put it on the fucking men. We're going to figure this out eventually. It's the goddamn guys with the problems.
Yeah.
Like, come on. Yeah.
My question is, do you have to then re-up it every 6 months because it just dissolves on its own?
I think so.
You're just like,
that's the idea.
Okay.
But again, it's like,
I wonder if they had a longer version, It's like,
probably.
I
probably
want
you could
one,
just
one that like lasts for 5 years.
you could do it probably just a vasectomy, which is reversible. So it's like, there's that. Yeah, for sure.
That's true. So, of course, what's interesting is the fact that this very simple and effective sounding implant exists doesn't mean that the patriarchy has gone away in the Dune universe. Right. In fact, Christina in the encyclopedia entry writes that the toxic masculinity is all over the place still.
This cracks me up. It's so funny.
Quote, there were some men, of course, who considered the implant unsatisfactory.
Yeah.
The Krino emperors, high-ranking officers in the Imperial Sardaukar, and the heads of most of the great houses were among them. And then a little later on in the entry, she continues, quote, while they might choose not to impregnate a certain woman at any one time, the idea that they could not impregnate any woman lacked appeal. End quote.
Fucking typical. Oh my God. These fucking golf bros. Just like, you mean I can't impregnate any lady? No thanks. That lacks appeal. Fuck you, dude.
Very creepy, but also very accurate, I would say,
Yeah.
Like this is a sentiment that I think many folks in modern Western society can identify with.
Yeah. I mean, Christine's out here being like, listen, we're going to have literally the perfect checks every single box solution.
Right. No side effects. Did I mention that? Zero side effects.
Zero side. It's super fucking 100% effective. You just, and there's still guys going, nah, don't like it. Don't like it. Not for me. Not for me. It's her problem. That sounds like a lady problem.
My scrotum, it doesn't accept any injections. Okay. It's not good for me.
It's not good for my. I have a
dissolves,
no injunctions.
Where does it dissolve? Where's it dissolve?
Is my scrotum getting bigger? I mean, I would do it if my scrotum bigger balls sounds pretty good.
I mean, bigger balls is good, right? The ladies love that.
Oh my God, that is how men talk. Yes, so I love that. And again, jokes on the fucking guys, right? Like she's talking about all the heads of major houses because we also know that they are mostly hooked up with Bene Gesserit of Secret Order.
That's the funniest part, yeah.
Yeah, and then on the other side of all of this, there is also a quick mention of abortive technologies and abortions.
Mm-hmm.
Christine writes that they are very doable. They're very available. And interestingly, actually, Giddy Prime produces like most of them. But they are unpopular, especially with the Butlerian jihad still looming in humanity's past. As we actually talked about pretty recently, the Butlerian jihad started with Sarah Butler, the unborn daughter of Jehan Butler, being aborted by an AI hospital director.
Right.
So there is this like abortions and the ending of perceived human life by technological intervention is like a little bit taboo as a byproduct of the Butlerian jihad. So it's not super popular. Now, this is also why Giddy Prime, who is just like, we're going to make stuff if it makes a profit, are one of the biggest producers of those abortive things. The other thing that I thought was super interesting here was actually how against abortion the Bene Gesserit is. And this is something that I think makes sense once I read it and once I thought about it for a little bit, but I just hadn't thought about it. So for me, I was like, well, I think at most the Bene Gesserit would be pretty much ambivalent, but Christine adds that it endangered their breeding program, their ability to like plan pregnancies in and out of their direct control in order to push along their breeding program would actually be endangered by their being readily available and untaboo, like socially acceptable. If someone could just say, oh, I'm 2 months pregnant, actually, that's not good for me right now. That might be literally something that took like years to set up for the Bene Gesserit. So they're like, let's actually work against this as best we can. So I think it is kind of between the lines in Christine's entry. This is a little bit my interpretation, but it sounds to me like the Bene Gesserit have sort of done what they can to make sure that abortion is not like a super acceptable thing as well. Because again, it endangers actually their ability to continue their breeding program.
And recall in Dune Messiah, the Bene Gesserit are also sort of, at that time at least, anti-artificial insemination. They want natural pregnancies, natural births.
Yeah.
They're against any sort of technological intervention or artificial means in order to achieve pregnancy, which I think also falls very much in line with their breeding program views. It's like we are orchestrating all of these plans and all of these bloodlines. And for there to be a mindset where people can do that artificially takes away from our control.
Yeah, especially, I mean, you think about how much fucking easier it would be if you could just like drug and sedate a guy and then with like a little futuristic, I don't know, syringe, gather some of his like semen and then just like in vitro, like that would be so much easier than fucking seducing him.
Where's the syringe going?
Oh, in the balls. Oh, in the balls. Scrotum. Not in the scrotum. yeah. In the where the semen is. But my point is, like, imagine a world in which the Bene Gesserit were okay with like getting people's genetic information in other ways. The whole thing to be like, the fact that they literally are like, you know what? Instead of doing in vitro fertilization and like artificial insemination, we're going to dedicate your entire fucking life, Margot Fenring, into seducing the nobles we point you at.
Yeah.
Is kind of crazy. Like that they have entire lives just dedicated to like, yeah, you're going to go to that party, you're going to seduce him, you're going to make sure he finishes inside of you, and you're going to take that genetic material away and carry that child to term. It's very restrictive. And I love actually, this comment from Mark in the live chat. The most interesting bits of world building for Mark is that the world of Dune is so religious and so conservative in many ways, like this thing, like the Bene Gesserit won't use in vitro fertilization.
Yeah. And Senva has a great point here in the chat as well. Senva writes, the refusal to employ artificial insemination is so restrictive, but in the end, they do adopt axolotl tanks.
Yeah. Again, literally turning a woman into a living vat womb rather than the alternative, I guess. But again, it's because axolotl tanks have their own benefits. Yeah, I think the end of the day, the Bene Gesserit represents this incredible power of women in the universe, but it's also interesting the ways in which they are ultimately utilitarian toward their ends and are willing to really do anything if it achieves what they want to achieve within their kind of restrictions.
Yeah, that's true.
John Curtis just quickly said, I figured the mother was always aware she was part of a breeding program. I think that's true, but keep in mind that some women, especially if they were like a Bene Gesserit of secret order, secret rank with a high-ranking noble, that noble, if abortion were like super fine with society, that noble could be like, actually, it kind of rubs my wife the wrong way that you're pregnant, so we're just going to get you to abort the child. And that would be totally fine if it were fine socially. But I think the point in Christine's article is that they've worked to make sure like it is not okay. People don't like that. So then if your concubine is pregnant, you as the duke or whatever are going to be like, well, I guess I have a child now, and there's nothing I can do about it. At least nothing savory that everyone would be on board with, right?
Well, Anais, we got a little off track there, but your wonderful email certainly opened up an interesting conversation. And again, we recommend you check out at least those two entries in the encyclopedia, the one about contraception and the one about Fremen menstruation. A lot of interesting details there that aren't necessarily about maternity and motherhood, but certainly are some fun world building around those ideas.
Yeah.
Sticking to some deeply political conversation.
Love it. People love when we do it.
Our next question is going to open a can of worms here, but I love it. This next question is from listener Jacob, who emailed us about the politics in Dune. Jacob wrote, with the third film promising to tackle the jihad, I'm having trouble not thinking about the current genocide taking place in Gaza. Although there are many differences between the conflicts of our world and the world of Arrakis, I feel that Dune's themes surrounding religious fundamentalism, oppression, and colonialism are more relevant than ever in today's world. I'll admit that I am quite anxious that Villeneuve won't have the guts to draw those very obvious parallels when adapting the third book. One of my biggest gripes with the second film was how dumbed down the version of the jihad was, from visions of a brutal, bloody genocide and warfare in the novel to millions of people starved to death because of me in the film.
Hmm.
The third film has a great opportunity to really say something important about how certain groups follow their leaders and the absolute horrors that can come from it. I'm very afraid that it will shy away from that opportunity.
Yeah.
Great email from Jacob, and I think a really important topic to touch on.
Yeah. Yeah. God, I love that people love when we talk about this. I mean, certain of our listeners get to piss off others, certain of our listeners. Yeah, very quickly, I'll cover my thoughts. Looking at what you've written, I think you summarized it well. I'll just say quickly, of course, like what's happening in Gaza is fucking unbelievably horrible beyond description. And also this like recent global rise in populism is super concerning. So I do think that there's like a huge possibility for Villeneuve to send a message with Herbert's IP, especially, I mean, again, as Americans, when we talk about, you know, I know that like you say, certain groups follow their leaders. That could apply to a great number of situations going on in the world right now. But like, for sure, the like whole MAGA movement is something that I think Frank Herbert would have had a lot to say about.
Yeah.
And I think that like, then you say, hey, we're making this big movie where a character compares himself to Hitler. And it's like, he acknowledges it. He's like, yeah, I'm kind of like Hitler. Like, I think that could be very, very poignant. But I do feel like I'm personally split a little bit. I do love when art is brave enough to make people uncomfortable, to ask those uncomfortable questions and to draw those connections that challenge people in their presuppositions about things that they may feel that they are familiar with. But I also worry that that is not going to make a difference at all. You know, how many, like, I go back and watch George Carlin as a stand-up comedian entertaining people with jokes about racism and you know, censorship and profanity and all these things. And none of it fucking got better because of him. It's very fun. It's cathartic. It's a release. And I think it would be a release for many of us to see that represented on the big screen. But I'd be worried that it just wouldn't do anything as always. You know, it's like, I don't know. I've gotten very cynical about art's ability and like entertainment and Hollywood's ability to like affect change in the world. Much more than that, I want someone with actual fucking influence to do something about Palestine and about Gaza, and like not a Hollywood director. Again, I'm a little exhausted trying to like put, you know, Mark Ruffalo's out here being a very vocal guy. And I'm like, let's celebrate him. But why is it his responsibility? Because he has a platform, sure. And then there's thousands of people who have bigger platforms than him and who don't do anything. And even when he does something, nothing changes, I feel like. So I don't know. I've become very cynical about a lot of this. I also think that like Dune for sure talks about populism and jihads and genocides, has a number of other themes that I do think are also very pressing: AI, machine attitudes, existential threats to humanity, environmentalism, the idea of like, you know, there's a lot of shit in the Dune books. And there are some other salient warnings that I think that our civilization needs now more than ever from this IP. So long story short, I do hope that Villeneuve handles it in a way that pays tribute to Frank's IP without necessarily like fully turning a blind eye to what's happening today. Because again, can you even make art completely isolated from the events surrounding it, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, those are my thoughts. A little vague, but that's where we're at. What about you?
Yeah, you know, as is typical, I'm going to come down a little harsher on this. I would gently push back on the feeling that what's the point of Mark Ruffalo speaking up about atrocities. I think that is very dangerous thinking, to say that, well, this is not my responsibility. Someone who has more power and a bigger platform than me should be solving this. I think if every single unnamed person who fought for civil rights in this country decided, well, I'm not MLK, so what do I have to do with this? I can't move the needle. I can't change anything.
Sure.
We would be in a much worse place as a country with much fewer rights, you know? And so, like, I think it is actually imperative for every person, at the very least, to be having these conversations and to take a stance on it, you know? So I think this is a really important question from Jacob and a really relevant one. Like Jacob says in the email, the themes and ideas in the Dune universe are deeply relevant to the world we live in today. And like you said, Frank Herbert, I think, would have many words to say about the MAGA movement and the trajectory that our country has taken in the last few decades. Jacob actually goes on to question himself a little bit. He wonders, like, is it even fair of me to ask a filmmaker like Denis Villeneuve to include political commentary in his film? Is it even fair for me to ask you guys as the hosts of a podcast to talk about this at all? Like, and I responded to Jacob in the email and I was like, it's absolutely fucking fair of you to ask anyone about this because it's relevant and it's important to talk about. I would argue it's absolutely fair. For what it's worth, I agree with Jacob's gripes in the email about Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2 and this like sanitization of the jihad. Of course, I understand it, right? Like, I understand why some studio executive would say, don't use the word jihad in our movie. Don't explicitly show images of brown people from the desert committing atrocities and killing people. I get that, you know, like I get the reason to push back on showing that on screen. Ultimately, though, it still rubs me the wrong way. I think it's a disingenuous representation of what Frank wrote in the story. It's a little too sanitized for my taste. I think in direct response to Jacob, I personally am not holding my breath.
Yeah, same.
That Dune Part 3 is going to be explicitly political. Like someone turning to the camera and being like, isn't this what's happening in Palestine? But here's what I'll say. Explicitly political? No, I don't think the film is going to do that. But I think, especially with a property like Dune, especially with the themes that Frank Herbert is playing with in these stories, it is important for anyone who is taking on the challenge of adapting them to recognize how those themes and how these characters and how these ideas also apply to our world today. And at the very least, to implicitly comment on those ideas through that story. I think the example that comes to mind for me is Andor. As always, I'm going to bring up Andor at any fucking opportunity. But Andor season 2, Tony Gilroy admitted that Disney essentially told him in not so many words to avoid using the word fascism in interviews about Andor and to avoid making direct parallels to the Trump administration. Like, people are going to ask you all of these political questions, just like, you know, don't say anything that's going to get us in trouble. It was sort of like the soft directions that Tony Gilroy was told when he was promoting Andor season 2. But you watch Andor season 2 and you're like, yeah, this is a fucking show about fascism and about the tactics that the Trump administration and many authoritarian administrations throughout human history have used against people. But I would point to Andor as like a perfect way to comment on current political events while still staying within the scope of your fictional universe, right? At no point did Cassian Andor turn to the camera and be like, and this is what happened in Minneapolis with ICE, you know? But you watch Andor and you're like, this is what happened in Minneapolis with ICE. And this is what's happening around our country and around the world. If you're doing political storytelling with a story that's deeply political, Andor to me is the gold standard of how to tackle that. In particular, Andor season 2. I think you can do both. I think you can tell a good story and you can also use that story to comment on current affairs. And I personally believe that it's actually imperative for artists to do both.
I mean, you do bring up a really great point that like we are doing this podcast about a book series that was like very political and was written by a very politically minded person talking a lot about politics. That's the sort of like grand irony whenever people complain about us talking about politics. It's like, it's a fucking Dune podcast where book 4 is just a worm talking about politics for like 400 pages. What do you want us to do? Like, talk about naked Duncan, Idaho? Okay, we will, but we'll also mention the politics. So it's true. Villeneuve is adapting one of the most like political science fiction books, and it would be very strange for him to like sanitize all of the politics out of it. But I also am a little like, I feel like it's not going to be everything it could be. And I agree. I think that my point about Mark Ruffalo was not necessarily that no one should do anything. Of course, activism's like the most important thing, especially when our officials are so motivated by what lobbyists show up that day with big shiny checks. It's like, yeah, it's up to the people with the voice to use their voices. I'm also just exhausted in the same way that like individual climate action is very important. But when big companies trick us into thinking it's your fault, Abu, for using a plastic straw, that the fucking
Totally.
like that narrative is so fucking exhausting. And so when people say, if only Villeneuve had stood on business and this whole Gaza situation would have been fixed up, I think that's like the other side of the spectrum. And I also am exhausted of that. So I want everyone, I completely agree. I think like anyone with a platform should be using it to some degree.
Right. I mean, just earlier this episode, we joked that it wasn't Frank Herbert's job to solve government and hand us a solution on a silver platter. That's never the job of art. You know, I think that's a very reductive way to think of art. Someone in the chat earlier said, like, the film The Great Dictator didn't stop great dictators from ever rising to power again. I think that's silly. Like, that is a very reductive way to look at art. Like, that's not the point of the film The Great Dictator. The point is to make that commentary, to bring that conversation forward so that when great dictators rise again in the future, there is a language to fight against them. There is a model to fight against them. There's discourse around that, you know, and that to me is when art is at its most powerful, is when it empowers and gives us the language to tackle some of the biggest problems in our world. Art is not a solution. It's not a magic wand that makes things go away and fixes them. I think that's silly.
But you know, it's a means of communication, and like we can't, like we should be communicating all the time, all of us. So yeah. Oh, okay. Well, listen, Jacob or Jakob, thank you so much for the question. Very interesting.
We didn't do an accent for Jakob, for Jacob.
I don't know that I would want to. That feels like, that feels pushing it. Southern American. That's punching up always a little bit. Yeah. And my parents are in Arkansas. I've got a fucking pass. But yeah, I think that this is a great comment to end on. And again, I asked how to say your name, but I guess I'll just say .org, Triven.org says, I think good stories that have political story arcs will resonate with people that view, and people are smart enough to connect it with current times. I agree. And I think that's a great way of saying it. It's like, you know, it will, like you're saying, Abu, The Great Dictator started a conversation and put in people's minds the words and the patterns that then, when things happen in the future, we can immediately click in and say, oh, I've seen this before. And I think that that's really powerful.
Yeah.
So excellent question, Jakob or Jacob. Let's take one last break. Don't go anywhere. When we're back, we have a couple of more kind of off-topic questions, and we have some questions in the live chat that I want to get to as well. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, folks. Let's wrap up this enormous Q&A, which whatever, you know, this is the end of an era. We had to go big here at the end here.
Yeah.
Let's start with something a little bit more lighthearted to shift gears from the heavy politics talk. From listener Noah, we got this email asking us to rehash our rankings. Noah asks, what is each of your rankings for the 6 Frank Herbert novels? I'm sure you have answered this already somewhere, but I'm not sure. Thanks. Keep doing what you guys do.
Oh, no.
Okay, it's time to re-rank. We have done this before.
Yeah.
And it's always evolving, but, you know, maybe it's time now that we've completed all 6 books. Maybe it's time to update our rankings.
I just want to say that this is going to be day to day. I cannot. I literally sitting down to do this, I was so tortured because the idea of putting any of these books in last place feels fucking awful because I love them all so much. I also, looking at the script, I wrote a lot more than you did. So why don't you go first?
You did write so much more than I did. I just wrote 6 bullet points ranking the 6 books. So here's my order. Don't at me. And by that, I mean definitely at me. I'd love to argue with everyone about this. Here is my ranking as of, what is today? As of May 2026 of all 6 Dune books. Number 1, Dune Messiah.
Yeah.
Number 2, Dune. Number 3, God Emperor. Number 4, Children of Dune.
Okay.
Number 5, Heretics. Number 6, Chapterhouse. I will not be explaining myself further.
Good Lord. Okay, I will go now and I will explain myself further. Enjoy my explanations. So, right now I have Children of Dune is 1. The book, I think, balances Frank's philosophizing between especially The Preacher, which is my favorite version of Paul, and Leto 2. I think their discussions about the golden path and about choice and prophecy and the future, all of that's super fucking interesting. That's my jam. Plus, there are some great set pieces. The Laza Tigers, Faradin, like the mask, the like bullshit mask. I love it. I think Children of Dune is a good balance of like, it's approachable, it's a good novel, it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, I actually have Chapterhouse Dune.
This is crazy.
Well, this might be recency bias because we just fucking.
Sure.
But dude, O'Drade, Teg,
yeah.
They're
course.
fucking spectacular. The whole premise, the whole conceit of like the Honored Matre as this grand looking glass to reflect back on one of the most important orders of all of Dune, this Duncan, Idaho bridging those gaps, the Mentat Hall of Mirrors stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like,
yeah.
Chapterhouse Dune cooks. And I love O'Drade so much as a character. And even like the way her death is handled. Excellent, excellent, excellent book. I think if you ask me in like a month, it'll be lower on the list. But today it's number 2. Number 3, Dune Messiah. Great book. Enough said.
Yep.
Number 4, Heretics of Dune.
Oh my God, what is happening? This is crazy. I'm just realizing you haven't said Dune, the book Dune by Frank Herbert yet.
I seriously considered putting it in last place. And
sorry,
I think no. I think I stand by that. I think if I'm hand to God honest, I think I do generally like the other books more than I like Dune, but I'll talk about that in a second. Heretics of Dune, I have at number 4. I would normally have put God Emperor of Dune there, but thinking about it, I was like, we meet O'Drade for the first time, we meet Teg for the first time, we the message that Leto left for the Bene Gesserit being found 1,500 years later by O'Drade is so fucking cool. The face dancers developing autonomy after thousands of years. And the whole conceit of like heretics are good in a dogmatic, shitty, like school of thought. And that's another form of stagnation. Fucking spectacular. I loved it. That book cooks. Okay. 5th place, Dune by Frank Herbert. Not even top 3. That's pretty sad. But okay, listen. I love Dune. I love it. If you couldn't tell, 6 years of this fucking podcast later. But I will say, the more of Frank's books that I've read, the more it feels like genuinely, as an author, he was young and a lot of his writing matured. I think like Heretics and Chapterhouse is some of his best, highest quality writing. And then going back to Dune, it's like good. It's great. It's still phenomenal. It won the Hugo Award. It's a great book. But especially with the like set pieces and the themes and the way that those themes mature and evolve and get deeper and more incredible in the later books, knocks Dune down. So there it is, 5th place. And in last place, a book that I am sometimes is my favorite book. If you ask me in 2 months, this might be number 1, God Emperor of Dune. What a fucking ride. I sometimes do call it my favorite book because I do love it but it's at the bottom of the list today. It just thinking openly and honestly about the 6 books today, I do feel like it is one of the most self-indulgent books. It does spend a lot of time on some of the same concepts over and over and over again.
And heretics in Chapterhouse don't?
But that's for the that's the whole fucking point. The whole point is O'Drade's in her fucking office and you're going, do something. And she's like, I should do something. It's intentional. That's him as a skillful writer. And again, you might like it or hate it, but as an art form, I do feel like it was intentional. I do not think Frank set out to bore us with Leto philosophizing. I think he was like, oh, I'm fucking cooking with gas. And I think that he missed the mark a little bit. I do think that God Emperor of Dune would be a stronger book if it were like 80% the length or 70% the length. I think if you cut out just one or two chapters, I think it'd be stronger. And that's why it's at the bottom of the list today, even though it's like my favorite fucking book. Anyway, there you are.
Wow. Ooh, for the folks in the back, can you just run down your list again real quick so they can synthesize?
So I said Children of Dune 1, Chapterhouse Dune 2, Dune Messiah 3, Heretics of Dune 4, Dune 5, and God Emperor of Dune 6. And ask me in like 2 weeks, it'll be exactly the opposite. And I'll be able to explain exactly why it's reversed. But, I love it. The heart is fickle.
Truly. Yeah. And again, this is so funny because the Overton window is like shifted so to like, it's like trying to rank your kids. I don't know, like we love all of these stories.
Yeah,
so trying to rank them is like so silly, but
and it's ridiculous.
I think if they were competing only in some sort of vacuum with each other, that's kind of how I thought of my rankings.
Yeah, I think the same. And again, I've also had like a lot of conversations recently, especially like with my wife. I'm reading a lot more books these days. And there are books when I'm like, I think that they are good, great books, but like they could be not as well written as better books. Like there's something about like, even if I like the stories and the characters and the arc and all this stuff, if just the language and the way that the words are handled feels worse, like tactily, sometimes I'm like, yeah, I think Chapterhouse feels better sentence to sentence than some of the earlier Dune books, So anyway, that's it. It is complicated. Now I am seeing hearts in the chat. I don't know if that's just because they love how much you're laughing at my fucking terrible take,
laughing with. I'm laughing a little bit at putting Dune 5 out of 6, but
I've really considered putting it 6. But that felt too intentional. That would have been doing it for the jester.
Yeah, that feels sacrilegious. Wow. Okay. Incredible. There you go, Noah. Those are our most up-to-date rankings as of today's recording, which is being recorded in May of 2026. Again, ask us again next week, email us again next month. And I agree, Leo, these rankings could totally be shuffled. Honestly, I'm looking at my ranking now and I'm like, I put God Emperor too high maybe, but who knows? That'll change next week.
I do want to quickly, we got a really interesting question from, again, Trevin.org, much earlier. And here, I'll put it on screen for 20 seconds. Trevin.org said, I keep seeing that everyone needs to read the other prequels before reading Hunters and Sandworms. Is that something we are considering, or does anyone agree that's the best way to approach the last two? So, we've mentioned before, but we'll say it again. We are not going to cover the prequel books in depth on Gom Jabbar, probably. But we are going to be talking about Hunters and Sandworms. They are apparently quite difficult to fully understand if you haven't read any of the prequels, because they are like bringing back a bunch of fucking characters that didn't exist in Frank's universe, like Erasmus and Omnius. But we are going to, when we cover them, do our best to provide as much context as we can. And some of that will be from firsthand, like the books that we've read. Some of it we might have to rely on like online summaries and things like that. But just very broadly, when we cover the last two books, we will do our best to make sure that it is intelligible, what we're reading and what we're talking about. We can't promise that we're going to like it or defend any of the choices that Brian and Kevin made, but just to assuage those concerns, we will do our best to make sure that that product is something you can listen to, even without having read the, all of the 18 or 19 prequel novels that Brian and Kevin have written that happened before.
Yeah. So we will cover those last two books to quote unquote complete Frank's story, but we're not going to go deep on those books. We're not going to do like chapter by chapter. We'll probably cover them in like
Right.
2 or 3 episodes each.
Yeah.
And we don't have any plans currently to go back and revisit any Brian prequel novels. Yannick also just threw in the chat, are you going to cover the complete encyclopedia? Yannick, that's what we've been doing for 6 fucking years. You're listening to it. This is it. We've been covering the encyclopedia bit by bit for 6 years.
Yes and no. So to the heart of your question, Yannick, we're not necessarily ever going to do a cover to cover Dune Encyclopedia coverage thing. That, to Abu's point, it is the bulk of our extended explanations and conversations are drawing from the Dune Encyclopedia. So a lot of it is in the last 6 years of Gom Jabbar, and especially with the Fullerton archives, like we are diving into stuff that didn't even make it into the Dune Encyclopedia. So we are covering the Dune Encyclopedia in my bad. No worries, dude. But yeah, it's a very funny question because Abu and I internally were like, kind of our whole podcast is just the fucking Dune Encyclopedia. So you're like, are you ever going to talk about it? We're like, yeah. A little bit.
So much of what we source is from the encyclopedia because Frank just wrote so little about the expanded universe.
Yeah. So we will continue to talk about the Dune Encyclopedia. If there is, I would say write us an email. If there is a specific way that you would want us to cover the Dune Encyclopedia that makes sense, absolutely. Send us that idea, gomjabarpodcast@gmail.com. We love episode idea suggestions. Looking at the last half of this year, we're going to be diving into some of the bigger thematic conversations. Now that we've covered the 6 books, we can now have some like really broad scope conversations about Dune lore. So if you have a specific vision in mind of like, I would love this kind of conversation about the Dune Encyclopedia, let's do it. I wanted to do a more meta discussion about like, we now have record basically of how much individual authors were paid. I want to see if I can track down some of the authors if they're still alive. There's a lot of cool stuff that's possible. But definitely, if you have an idea, let us know. Best way to do it, send us an email, and we'll get to it if we can.
Leo, you do know these people are going to ask us for a 6-hour episode that just covers every entry in the encyclopedia alphabetically, start to finish, A to Z.
Yeah, and I'll give them the 9-hour version that includes the 30 cut entries.
That's right, and then a bonus episode for the 30 cut entries that we uncovered.
Yeah,
for sure. I think I want to end. Mark wrote this really lovely comment in the chat, and I want to perhaps maybe wrap up today on this because I think it's an absolutely true sentiment as we're just talking about art and stories and Chapterhouse and kind of just reflecting back on this 6-year journey we've had with Dune.
So true.
Mark wrote that I love the feeling when you pick up a new book and read the first page and you can see right away that this is an author that knows how to put words together. It's so delicious. And I couldn't agree more.
So delicious.
I've had a love of reading since I was a kid. Libraries have always been my safe space that I retreat to when I need it. And gosh, there's nothing better than that feeling. Like no drug will give you that high of like cracking open a new book, reading that first paragraph and going, oh, fuck, here we go. I most recently had that with Ursula K. Le Guin because I recently read The Left Hand of Darkness. And Ursula K. Le Guin, folks, is a sci-fi author that can write, capital W write. Such a great
I've always spelled right with an R, so that proves that she's in a league outside of me. Yeah, I've taken a new hobby where I look up so I'm working my way through all of the Hugo nominees for this year.
Oh, amazing.
I'm like, it'd be so sick. You know, we keep talking about Asimov and you know, and Herbert and like Van Vogt for World of Nole and like these people who've like won awards and like they're so celebrated. And then there's like people today writing books that are being celebrated. And I'm like, I should read these books as well. And I'm on my third, I finished 2 already. And yeah, there's such good authors just writing fucking excellent books. I read Shroud, which is excellent for anybody who wants to.
Adrian Tchaikovsky, so good.
So good. It's so fun. The way he puts language together, again, excellent. And then I read The Incandescent, which is like magic school for wizards, but it's following like a teacher in her mid-30s. And it's like she's the headmaster. And it's so different than what I was expecting, and it's excellent. And now I'm reading The Everlasting or something like that, which I think is like a time travel, but it's like they're both fantasy books. I did not know, in all honesty, that Hugo included fantasy because I'm stupid. But now I do, and I'm enjoying it because I enjoy fantasy.
Yeah, for sure. We're covering Death of the Author over on Science Fiction Book Club. That's the next book that Opes and I are covering on that podcast. And I will admit, like, Afrofuturism is a huge blind spot in my science fiction knowledge. So I'm really excited to get into this book because I cracked it open yesterday on a flight listening to the audiobook, and I listened to that first chapter and I was like, oh, here we fucking go. You know, like this is going to be a good book. Like, I love when you can just tell.
Yeah, dude.
Such a great feeling. So great. Thank you for dropping that comment in the chat, Mark. I think that's a really beautiful note to end today's Q&A on.
Indeed. And on that note, dear listeners, before we let you go, oh, no, we have to tell you in the next episode. My God, I was so excited to end this episode, but it's true. We have more episodes coming. And in fact, in the next episode, we are going to be taking a comprehensive look at Frank Herbert's decision to include the hidden Jews in Chapterhouse Dune. So very interesting conversation, lots of different facets to cover with that conversation. It's one that we nearly did as a takeaway in one of our episodes, and then we were like, there's no fucking way we can do this topic justice. Yeah. So we're going to be talking about that. I do think there are some broader conversations we can now have about the books that kind of fall into this all books are game spoiler, territory.
Totally right. All 6 books.
All 6 books, dude. Hashtag all 6 books. So keep your eye on the feed for those things coming up. But now, before we let you go, we want to let you know some ways to support us and to keep in touch with us. And of course, the 2 best ways are one, to become a patron over at patreon.com/gamjabar. The other is to get some Dune-themed swag from our merch store, gamjabar.shop. Those links are in our show notes. We so appreciate it. And hey, as the fucking movie's coming out, tell your friends about your favorite Dune podcast. Word of mouth is so helpful to us. And we so appreciate it. It's a free way to support us.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. The back half of this year, folks, is going to be so fun.
It's going to be so much fun.
And not just because we're planning to revisit Messiah, and I'm going to make the case for why it is the best Dune book in the series and should be everyone's number 1.
Number 3 today.
Number 3
What was it? Number 3? Yeah, it was number 3.
Okay, at least in the
Chapterhouse is better.
Okay, well, on that note, another final reminder here. Email us. Send us your questions. The questions we pulled today, many of them were from wonderful emails from our listeners. Send us your questions, your thoughts. Send us your current Dune rankings. What is it today? What is it going to be tomorrow? gamjabarpodcast@gmail.com is the place to get in touch with us. We don't always respond in a timely manner because we literally have like 900 emails in that inbox that are unanswered right now. But I promise you, we do look at them. We open them, we look at them, and we say, I'll get to this later. And then, 6 months pass. But eventually, you'll hear from us.
Yannick.
gamjabarpodcast@gmail.com.
Now I need to go take like 35 minutes to re-rank all of the books. So I'll be right back. Actually, maybe Heretics is number 1, and now Chapterhouse is 2, and then,
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Honestly, for the rest of the year, like, we should open every episode with what is our Dune book rankings today.
Truly different every day. I mean, really, genuinely.
Truly.
And actually, we're going to talk about Dune Elixir this year. Maybe Dune Elixir makes the list. It's not even written by Frank Herbert. That would be so...
Now we're breaking the rules. Anything's
so rude.
Because I'm putting Le Guin on the list if we're just breaking rules now.
Shroud, number 5. Not even Dune. Yeah. Well, friends, there is no real ending. It's just the place where you stop the recording. But this podcast is always one step beyond logic. So help spread the word of Muad'Dib and leave us a review in Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And be sure to check out the other shows on the Lord Party Podcast Network on lordparty.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at lore_party. We're also on YouTube. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, whoever controls the podcast controls the universe. We'll see you on the golden path.